Hello, welcome back once again to India Post Live. That's India's first web TV news conversation portal. Today, right now, we're going to talk about a slightly, or rather a very disturbing issue. We might probably not have any more rhinos come 2020. In fact, Benson Okita, who is a senior researcher at the Kenya Wildlife Service, warned of this fact at a conference in Pretoria, South Africa, recently. The conference was titled Risk Assessment of Rhino Horn Trade, and would you believe it, the poaching of the African species, the black and white rhino, has increased 7,000% from 13 in 2007 to 1,004 in 2013. That is so scary. It might be a grim reality that you and I will be able to watch sea rhinos only in pictures after 2020. We will quickly go into a report, but before that, we have with us in this conversation my first guest, Neha Sinha, who is policy officer and advocacy officer with the Bombay Natural History Society. Neha,
Hi.
thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us. And also from Indonesia, we have with us Bibhab Talukdar, who is the coordinator, Asian coordinator of the International Rhino Foundation. He joins us through Skype. Bibhabda, thank you so much for joining us on this conversation. Before we continue, let's quickly take a look at this report.
Today, about 27,500 rhinos live in the wild, over 3,000 of which are found in India alone. Poaching of rhinos continues unabated in Assam's Kaziranga National Park despite strict measures in place. Reports suggest that the park, home to the endangered one-horned rhino, sees infiltration by poachers almost every day. Experts are of the opinion that there will be no rhinos in the wild as the remaining few numbers will be fenced off in protected areas. Poachers make millions of dollars every year by hacking these animals to death. A rhinoceros horn can fetch up to nearly $150,000 in the international illegal market, especially that of a one-horned rhinoceros. In its bid to save the one-horned rhinos, the Assam government has now proposed dehorning of rhinos. So leaving the animal defenseless, is that the only solution? And is that enough?
All right, let me first talk to Neha. And Neha, we just heard of the new policy or the new proposal on dehorning of the rhinos.
Yes.
Like a preventive measure. How effective do you think that will be?
In my opinion, it won't be effective at all. The proposal is being looked at by the Assam government, and it's a direct response to a lot of poaching that's been happening. And Assam has done a lot to prevent poaching in the past few years, including this year. But it's a very difficult battle, and this is one of the means that they have suggested to find an answer. But I don't think it's going to help because the proposal at the moment looks at dehorning rhinos that are outside protected areas, while poaching is done mostly inside protected areas.
Right.
And I think it will create a greater premium on the rhinos that have horns. The ones that are not dehorned, it may create a greater demand for them. Secondly, poaching can be quite opportunistic. It's not a perfect thing. You're not always able to see the animal you're poaching. So you may have poaching also of rhinos that have their horns removed. And this is something that's already happened in a few South African countries where rhinos were in fact dehorned, but poachers continued to kill them either out of vengeance and anger or just because they managed to kill an animal which did not have a horn. So I don't think it's going to help at all. In fact, it would be an admission of defeat. And the very ethics, it calls into question the very ethics of intervention. If we are thinking of dehorning rhinos to save them today, then we may consider detusking elephants tomorrow.
Right.
And this is really a very difficult, it is of course a very difficult question to answer, but this is not the way forward. I think it will also undermine the efforts by the Assam government. The Assam government has put in many years of relentless patrolling and enforcement to save the rhinos that we have today.
Right.
And this
let me also get a reaction from Mr. Bibhab Talukdar. Sir, what is your reaction to the proposal of dehorning of the rhino?
Well, I think let me clarify one thing. The Assam government, in fact, didn't decided to dehorn the rhinos in national parks or wildlife sanctuaries. The discussions came in, while discussing about the translocated rhinos. So actually the dehorning things which was discussed of late was basically whether the rhinos to be translocated from existing areas to a new area should be dehorned. Second dehorning option was discussed was whether the rhino which often stray out of the national park or rhino bearing areas and go out of the protected areas, whether those could be dehorned. Then government of Assam has constituted a committee. The committee has sought opinion from the larger section of people and NGOs. And the informations that I have come to learn, almost 90% people or organizations are against it. So I am quite confident that government of Assam is not going to pursue this further.
All right, all right. You are the Asian coordinator of the International Rhino Foundation. Why exactly are the rhino horns so much in demand?
Well, it is being, basically used in countries like Vietnam and China.
Right.
And there has been demand because of economic, upliftment of the people. Earlier, because they have more money, they can afford to buy rhino horns. And there are also, some beliefs that, rhino horns cures cancer, because one of the minister of Vietnam, he declared that because of using rhino horn, he got cured from cancer.
Yes.
So because of those kind of issues, the demands for rhino horn has been increasing. As a result of which, last year, the South Africa alone lost over 1,000 rhinos.
Yes.
In Assam, we lost 41 rhinos, which is quite unfortunate because we used to lose rhinos less than 10, 3 years, down the means prior
Why
to.
the sudden spurt? Why the sudden increase in killing?
Well, first, as I mentioned, that the minister of Vietnam said that he got cured, by using. So that is one of the reason. And second is also, the organized, the smugglers, and the increasing market in Vietnam is attracting more people. And as I said, because of economic upliftment, it is a status symbol for Vietnamese people. China, of course, has been playing a major role in rhino horn trade.
Right.
So all these issues are increasing the demands for the rhino horn, and that is why rhinos are being killed mercilessly.
Neha, let me ask you this. The medicinal values that the rhino horn supposedly has. I mean, it's not just cancer. 16th century Chinese, medicinal people have said that it cures fever, it cures headache, it cures typhoid, it cures virtually everything. But a rhino horn, scientifically, we know it is just keratin. Keratin, the stuff that is our hair is made of, our nails are made of.
Yes.
So it's as good as chewing your own nails, in fact, right?
Yes. This is a battle that conservationists have fought for so many years against these so-called, solutions given by animal contraband. And just like rhino horns, you also have these supposed cure with tiger nails, and pangolin scales. Pangolin is a kind of anteater found in India. So we're constantly trying to say that this is not evidence-based medicine, and even if it holds value in a certain country, it is very much illegal in our country. So this is really a transboundary issue. I mean, the demand is coming from another country and they are poaching animals that belong to ours, and as per our laws, you cannot hunt these animals. So, there's a lot of campaigning that goes on in these countries, China and Vietnam, for instance, in which NGOs try to say that there are other alternatives. Surely you can pop a crocin for fever, and you can take something else for arthritis, or there are other kinds of medicines available. But I think, as Bibhavta pointed out, it's also aspirational value. And I think it's the course of human history that whatever is rare is always considered more valuable.
Right.
And which is why we need to do both enforcement as well as campaigns which sort of appeal to the emotional, values of where the demand is coming from. And especially the young people, I think, should be a good hope, because if they see graphic pictures of the way rhinos are being killed, and the way tigers are being killed, the way now lions are being killed in India, even lions are being poached in Gir National Park for their bones, for their keratin, for their nails. In fact, there was a very interesting campaign done by someone in the West. He basically collected his clippings, his nail clippings over a year, I think, and he just made a big pile of them and he said, are you going to put this on the international market because it's like a huge amount of keratin. Basically just making fun of the fact that you're taking an unfortunate animal's horn, which it uses to live its life, to find food. It uses the horn for foraging for food, it uses the horn in its mating exercises, etc. And you're depriving it, you're killing it for what? For just ill-founded beliefs when you have medicines that cure.
In fact, we
all
were
these
just
things.
talking that, the rhinoceros doesn't really have an enemy. It doesn't have a predator.
Yes,
The predator is
yes.
man.
Yeah.
And that's a grim reality.
Yeah, in fact, it's evolved, the way it's evolved, its ancestors were the Triceratops, it's a dinosaur.
Yes.
And the rhino, survived the mass extinction of animals, which was many centuries ago. It's evolutionary a very perfect animal. It hasn't evolved a lot because it's already evolved, a highly evolved species. So it hasn't changed a lot. And it has no natural predators. It's just a young rhino which sometimes gets predated by a tiger, but an adult rhino really does not have. It's just very unfortunate that the same animal is being picked on by mankind for something completely dubious.
Bibhabda, how do you see the efforts that are being made at a national level to protect the rhinoceros? You were talking about, what's happening in Assam. We have about 3,000 rhinos in India, the one-horned rhino.
India about 2,700, 800 probably, and then we have about close to 550 in Nepal.
Right.
So the world population is 3,300 at this moment.
Right.
Well, I think I won't say that nation as a whole has taken initiative to protect rhinos. I think it is the provinces where the rhinos are lying.
Yes.
They have taken some steps. But I feel it is the nation, it is the country as a whole should have a stringent policy on rhinos, because rhinos may be found in 3 provinces in India, but this is a unique species to the country. So I think a lot of efforts needs to be done at the central level. But again, in the state level, I think the West Bengal, Uttar Pradesh, Assam, they need to work unitedly. And because poaching is the only threat, which is likely to jeopardize the population build-up of the greater one-horned rhinos. So I think there are a couple of things which is important. First is the enforcement, intelligence gathering, and second is ensuring conviction of arrested poachers. Conviction in this country, in our country, is very less. With regards to rhino poaching, it is even less. I think in the last 100 years, if we see, probably 1,000 poachers were arrested, and probably the conviction will be less than 10% out of 1,000.
Right. Neha, what about the deterrent factor? What about the fact that the Assam government has said that, it's a shoot at sight in Kaziranga?
Yeah, in fact, Assam has shown a lot of political will to save the rhino, and they were the first state to issue shoot at sight orders. So basically, anybody they see inside Kaziranga, which is a protected area, for instance, can just be shot.
Has it
so
worked?
I think it has worked. I think the rhino numbers have gone up after this order, and Assam, the forest department has worked very hard. Poachers have better guns than forest department. It's a known fact. But it is because of the patrolling, the vigilance of the forest guard, who is like the frontline staff, the fact that he's walking the forest, which is a very difficult terrain, he's walking through the grasslands at great risk to himself from a poacher or even from a wild animal, and he's walking this beat, and he's the one who has protected the rhino. And
wouldn't you agree that the forest officials are already at a disadvantage because of the highway that passes through the Kaziranga Park? That goes to Digboy?
Yes, there's a lot of evidence that suggests that poachers use these kind of roads.
Yes,
so
it's an escape route.
Yeah, that's another issue that needs to be taken up. It perhaps helps poaching indirectly, even in tiger reserves that have highways running through them. For instance, in Sariska Tiger Reserve, poachers have used the reserve, just got onto a bus after poaching an animal and have escaped. So these are all issues that need to be looked at, and Kaziranga is a very large park, and there's also biotic pressure. But as Bibhabda said, poaching is the number one problem. So vigilance needs to be continued, and conviction of poachers. So poachers who are caught need to be made an example of, so that other people don't follow suit. If a guy is poaching a rhino, then other people should not feel that they can get away with it, because it is Assam's pride, it is India's pride. You can't imagine a rhino without a horn. It's like imagining an elephant without a trunk.
As Bibhabda said, it is more of a national concerted effort that needs to be put in, instead of just a provincial thing by the three states of Uttar Pradesh, West Bengal and Assam. Besides China and Vietnam, this is a huge multi-billion-dollar international criminal activity, the poaching of the rhino horn. Where is this money going? Can you give us an idea? Other than China, is it only China and Vietnam? Is it only cancer, or is there a larger, more grim, path that this money is taking?
Well, I think, it's definitely most of them goes, because of the beliefs that, it will improve the health, whether it is cancer, whether it is, fever.
Typhoid, yes.
And a lot of other issues. So definitely, the major consuming countries are China, Vietnam. And there are other countries like Thailand, and probably
What
Laos.
about Africa? What about Africa itself? I mean, we have heard reports that, the money goes into funding terrorist organizations.
That is very much possible, because, there are nexus between the wildlife smugglers and the terrorists and arms suppliers. There are instances where, probably the rhino horns were exchanged, with arms. So this rhino horn trade should be taken at an international level, and it has to be crushed. Otherwise, it is going to destabilize not only the rhino-bearing countries, but who knows, it will probably destabilize the whole world because of the money power.
Right. So last comments from you regarding, in India, a concerted national effort. Can you operationalize that for us, sir? Can you give us very specific 3 or 4 bullet points as to what can be done to protect the rhino from poaching?
Well, I think India should have something like a Project Rhino, which is going to support the rhino-bearing areas in India.
Right.
Second is an enforcement and strengthening of intelligence.
Right.
And third, the government should ensure that whatever efforts has been given for conviction needs to be enhanced. All poachers involved in rhino poaching has to be punished and convicted. Right. Then only rhino poaching could be stopped or minimized.
All right. Thank you so much, Bibhabda. So the biggest deterrent can be a higher conviction rate, stronger measures of to just stop these people from acting out on these poor animals like this. Neha, Bibhabda agreed that it is a larger issue. It's not just about China and Vietnam and Thailand, but it is also funding international crime.
Yes.
What about in India? What do you think happens in India? Does all the money, or do all the horns go straight away to China, or is there another local factor also involved?
I think the horns go to China. I think China is where the demand comes from.
Right.
But if one were to think about what is done with the money that is earned, it can't be anything good. Poachers are part of an illegal trade, and money that's illegally taken goes back into illegal things. And in fact, wildlife crime is number 2 in the world in terms of illegal trade. The number 1 is drugs and ammunition, arms and ammunition, and the second is wildlife crime. So, there is a little bit of evidence that suggests that places in India which were controlled or are controlled by Naxals have more poaching. Now, we don't know who is doing the poaching, but certainly, this money doesn't go into anything that's good for the nation. So I think the question is more than that of a poor animal getting poached. I think the question also is of a lot of money entering hands, and we don't know where that money is being used. And it's a question obviously of governance. It creates a governance challenge, and it creates a challenge to society as a whole. And we really need to take it seriously.
Right. So I believe that Bibhabda also, as he just said, the situation is really quite grim.
Yes.
We now have with us Ratnadeep Chaudhary. Ratnadeep is special correspondent with Tehelka. He is joining us on Skype to talk more about this issue. Ratnadeep, thank you so much for joining the conversation. I'm Nilanjana. We have Neha Sinha with us. Neha is Advocacy and Policy Officer with the Bombay Natural History Society. We were just talking about how grim the society is, the situation is. We were talking about the report that has come out in a conference in Pretoria, wherein by 2020 we might not have any more rhinos, and that there has been a 7,000% increase in poaching in Africa from 2007. 13 in 2007 to 1004 in 2013. Your first comments on this issue, Ratnadeep?
Well, poaching is a serious threat in the countries where we have rhino population. It's not only a case of India and Assam. It's a global threat
Yes.
to animal conservation. But when I need to speak about this, let me straight away come to the ground perspective from Assam. We had Mr. Bivak Talukdar, one of the most noted rhino conservationists from Assam and from India, speaking to us minutes before. The most key factor here in Assam or in Northeast India, from where I report in terms of rhino conservation is the lack of awareness among the people, among the local population who are involved hand in gloves with the poachers in this trade. They don't know that all these rhino horns actually don't have any medicinal value. They believe that the buyers tell them that yes, they have medicinal value, and that's why it has an international market, and they are into it. So they are getting money till the point of time you have this kind of lack of awareness among the common people who are living close to the wildlife reserves. I'm not saying that they don't protect wildlife. They do protect. I have seen myself how the local population would come forward in terms of rescue operation of animals who would be marooned in floods in Assam. But
yes.
but when it comes to conservation, there are conservation effort, but are these conservation effort really taking the local population into confidence? Are they the change drivers in the conservation effort? I have a feeling in Assam, particularly in the rhino reserves, it is not. It is largely locked between the state forest department and some international NGOs.
So you're saying that we need to narrow it down and make local population a stakeholder in the fight against poaching.
Absolutely. That is one. Two is, now this is a situation where we have this general elections being fought across the country. Assam has 14 seats.
Yes.
Rhino poaching has not been made a political issue. You had this platform of wildlife NGOs in Assam, and I have been working in close association. I know some of them would be hearing me on this live chat. I hope they would take this criticism that they could have taken much more initiative in terms of building up a popular thought process in the state that rhino poaching needs to be made a political issue. Let BJP, let NDA, let UPA, let Congress, let BJP, even the regional parties like AIUDF or AGP, make their stand clear that if voted to power, what would they do in terms of
so you think there is a lack of political will? You think there is a lack of political will?
There is definitely a lack of political will, and there is a lack of initiative from the society, within the society in Assam particularly, to push the political masters to show political will in terms of tackling this issue.
Neha?
This is
I just think you had something else to say at the beginning of the show.
I actually disagree with politicizing any issue like this. In fact, it was raised by Narendra Modi, who accused the Congress government of killing rhinos to make space for Bangladeshi illegal refugees. He recently made that comment, Narendra Modi. I think, well, I understand his point, and the point is well taken.
Yes.
But I don't think the answer lies in politicizing an issue. I think the answer lies in making positions clear. And it needs to be, rhino poaching needs to be seen as an important problem, as a problem that is not just a problem related to the rhino, but also a problem which is anti-society and is a serious crime issue. So yes, parties need to make their stand clear, but I'm not sure politicizing anything is a good answer as far as social change is concerned, because conservation is all about social change.
Ratndeep, Bibhabda just told us a few minutes ago that this has to be a national issue. You
Yes.
cannot localize the issue. So probably, I'm asking you, to make it a local issue at election rallies, how far would that really go in making this issue as as big and as national and as important as it actually is? The situation is so grim, Ratnadeep. We are looking at an extinction of this animal by 2020. I mean, that's scary. That's just scary to think of not being able to see a free roaming rhinoceros 6 years later. Isn't that a very scary thought? Now, do you think just talking about it at election rallies helps? Don't you think there has to be a much bigger, much wider, concerted effort by all stakeholders, and as you very rightly pointed out, by the local people,
Yes.
educating them, making them aware of the issue, and having like a guided, like a missile, just going forward to end the menace?
Absolutely, I take this point that you're talking, and I agree with Neha about positioning it and not politicizing. When I'm
Yes.
talking about politicizing, I'm basically talking about positioning. Right now,
Right.
this issue has not been even positioned, and I believe that when you talk about Assam Northeast, until and unless you make it, unfortunately, until and unless you politicize it, there is a tendency from the political masters sitting in New Delhi of overlooking it. So in terms of looking at that perspective, I have a feeling that this was a situation where the NGOs, the wildlife advocacy NGOs could have come in, and they could have done a lot of things. To politicize, you don't need to go and tell the political parties, okay, you make your point clear. That has been done. In fact, they did a press conference, but they could have also run a signature campaign. They could have also run a campaign. Now you have Kaziranga National Park, and in Kaziranga National Park there is a constituency, Lok Sabha constituency, from where key candidates are contesting, but I haven't seen them in their rallies speaking about rhino poaching. Now when Vivavda says that we need to make it a national issue, really we do need to make it a national
We
issue,
need to have a
so
Project
that,
Rhino. He says we
yeah,
need to have a Project Rhino. Yes.
well, we already have see, the point is how many projects you will go on having. More
So
projects one
Ratnadeep, I
after
think
another doesn't help.
if I understand what you're trying to say is, not only does there need to be a national policy streaming down to the local level, but also local leaders making it an issue and taking it up to the national level. Is that what you're talking? Both sides of the pyramid need to be
both
active.
sides of the coin, as well as a bottom up approach. Also, because you look at the situation when Jayanti Natarajan was the Union Minister for Environment and Forest.
Right.
She came down to Kaziranga National Park. She announced that, okay, we will have this unmanned surveillance aircraft. We will have this. We will have that. All the promises till now made remains unfulfilled. Who
Great.
questions
I think
them?
that's a very
Rhinos
valid
are not
point.
voters. Rhinos are not voters. Narendra Modi made it a point. Narendra
Yes.
Modi made it a point, and he brought in the issue of illegal Bangladeshi. He was just trying to score political brownie points out of it.
Right.
I'm not talking about political brownie points. I'm talking about policy framework. I'm talking about policy vision.
Right. All right. All right. Ratnadeep, thank you so much. You are talking of a bottoms down approach, and Bibhabda has talked of a bottoms up approach, probably, but basically I think we all agree that the effort needs to be there from both sides, from the national level, the policy level, as well as local level. Neha, let me come back to you. The situation is really grim,
Yes.
and right now, okay, over the next 6 months, what do you think needs to be done? How do you see a way out of the situation?
I think poachers need to be sent to jail, and they need to be made an example of.
The conviction,
Because
yes.
we have dismal conviction rates, and there's a hierarchy even in wildlife poaching conviction. Poachers who, poach tigers.
But you're shooting them anyway, no? You are shooting them anyway. You're supposed to be shooting them anyway.
Yes,
but are
but
you actually
not-
doing that? Has actually anybody been killed after that order?
Yes, poachers have been killed,
Have been
and they
killed.
were in fact poachers. They were not innocent people who were shot down.
Because that can be a huge embarrassment for the government
It
again.
can be
Yes.
a huge embarrassment for the government, and the government took a very strong political stand when it issued the shoot at sight order in Assam.
Yes.
And this is now being followed in Maharashtra, which has had a huge problem with tiger poaching. But I think the way forward, as my colleague suggests, is of course working with local communities who often act as informers to poachers. Who often tell them about where the rhinos
Sighting.
are, etc., and give them for what? For just very small amounts of money. They are not big stakeholders in this. But we really need to bust the chain of command. I think in poaching, because it's such a high value game, we really need to bust the middleman who's sitting in the big city. He's not sitting in Kaziranga or Manas reserves. He's in the big city. He's in Kanpur or Delhi or Bombay, and he's making a lot of money. And recently, Sansar Chand, who was the biggest poaching kingpin of India, died in jail. But it is well known also that the poaching racket continued even while he was in jail, because he has such a big nexus of middlemen.
Yes.
And his family members, etc., were accused of carrying on the poaching. So I think we need to have conviction of the guy who's killing the rhino.
And also strengthening, as Ratnadeep pointed out, strengthening of forest officials, strengthening
Yes.
of mechanisms, strengthening of technology to ensure
Yes.
that we are not weak. They should
Yes.
not feel.
We just cannot be soft on this issue, because
Yes.
this is not a soft issue. A poacher walking around with an AK-47 is not a soft issue.
Absolutely.
He will shoot the forest guard.
Absolutely.
He will shoot the rhino. He will shoot a tiger if he sees it. So we have to be hard on this. We have to use technology. We have to keep the morale high of forest department staff who lead very difficult lives and who have a very hard time doing this kind of enforcement and patrolling. And yes, we also need to work on greater conviction and finding out through the poacher, who the middleman is and what is the chain of command. Who are
And
the
going
guys?
ahead and
Who
going
are the
ahead and
guys
getting
really
them.
making
Right.
the money?
Right.
And they are the ones who need to be busted.
So awareness at all levels, bottoms up and bottoms down approach from the national to the local, and vice versa. All right, Ratnadeep, thank you so much for joining us. Neha, thank you so much for being
Thank
on
you
the
for having me.
conversation. It is a very, very grim situation, but let us hope, let us keep our fingers crossed that 2020, come 2020, we still see rhinoceros roaming
horns.
with horns, with horns, yes, roaming about in the jungles of India. Thank you so much.
Thank you.